Good morning. I'd like to thank you all for coming today and celebrating with us and remembering my mom. And just, I know a lot of you have seen her recently, but over the last couple of weeks she was having tough times. But she really, truly loved people and loved being here at the church. I'm here basically because I'm her daughter, her favorite daughter, and I'm my brother's favorite sister, basically, because I'm the only girl. So I can claim that nobody else can right now, so that's great. We all wear many hats. We have many roles that we fulfill in our lives. And my mother, again, filled a lot of the same roles that we do, mother, daughter, sister, but also nurse. And that's a legacy that she's left with myself and my daughter, Danielle. We're both nurses as well. But one of the subsets in nursing that she has that we don't is she was a nurse during World War II, and it was in the Nurse Army Cadet Corps, and that would soon become an Army nurse if the war had continued. We can't share that with her. But also an even smaller subset of that is the fact that she believed in God and Jesus Christ as her Savior. So that's something that I think we could say that, but do you have all those elements in it? We don't all have that. One of the things, too, that makes her separated from the rest of us is how patient and calm she was and under pressure, and that's what made her a great mom, and it also made her a great nurse as well. I have to say, she did grow up in this church. She got married in the church. She had us come to Sunday school in this church, and so she would love to know that she's here now today, too. When you look at nursing and where I would sit on the front porch, she loved sitting on the front porch and looking at, the nice day and the beautiful sunshine, and she just loved sitting out there. We would talk a lot. And we talked about how different nursing was, what she did in the 40s versus what we do today. And she just marveled at, how things have changed throughout the years. And so that's why I'd like to reminisce a little bit about the nursing part of what she went through. In the days when high school, I said to her one time, "Why did you become a nurse? What made you do that in 1942 or 43?" And in those days, you were either going to be a teacher or a nurse if you were a female. And she said, "If I was going to be a teacher, that's too much studying, and I'm not studying, so I'm going to be a nurse." And I think myself and my daughter Danielle would say, "Bah humbug," because we study a lot. But that being said, nurse training, basically you would have to take an entrance exam, and she considered herself a B.C. student because she was too tired after ice skating to study too much, so she'd be up in the wee hours of the morning trying to study, and then school, of course, starts at 8 o'clock in the morning, and we all know she hated mornings, which is another good reason for her to be a nurse, because she worked 3 to 11 and sleep all into the morning. But she said that, it would be just better for her, to better fit for her. So at one point she did take the nurse's training exam and passed it and was preparing to go to school when my grandmother, her mom, said, "Are you smart?" And my mother was like, "Why are you asking me that?" And I guess other people who were straight A students in school did not pass the exam. So I think it was God's will that he had to go to nursing school. Nursing school in the day was a training program. It was 6 months of education, didactic lessons, and then followed by 3 months of rotating through all the different types of nursing that there were. So for med-surg and for pediatrics, Rhode Island Hospital, which was very intense and just a lot of work, as you can imagine, in the day. And then she would go to Butler for psychiatric training, and then lying in, which is now women and infants, for her maternity training. She did great. She talked about a lot of the stress that she said, for the most part, she and her friends had somehow could sneak a lot of good times in the middle of all the stress. And I probably had that little mischievous part of myself too, and I could understand it. But she said for some reason the instructors would say to us, they'd get us all together and say, "Listen, if you're going to jump off a roof, do it at your own house." So I guess suicide was like big, which I was like, wow, that's like serious things. But there was people who felt that pressure, even in nurses training, to do well. And my mother just glided through it and made out as best she could with her friends. And then graduated in 1946, as we said, just after the war. She was in the Cadet Corps, but at that point she was released from her obligations, so she continued working at Rhode Island Hospital as a nurse. The day shift when they were in school and into after they got out of school, they were actually staffed the hospital by the third year of their training, because all the graduates were going off to be Army nurses. And the day shift was very difficult. 12 hours a day they would work, but they got 2 hours at lunch, which is odd. You'd work, then you could have 2 hours off to go for lunch if you could do it, and then come back for the rest of your day, which is very odd. And nights was her preferred shift because, again, you don't have to get up early. But on the night shift, you had to be kind of quiet, not because of the patients, but because you would disturb the bats that were in the hospital. So one night she recalls a time where somebody did something and it set the bats off and they're all flying around. And it was wards of patients, bed by bed by bed, all the way down, like 40 patients in a ward, she would say. And the bats are flying around, and she and the other nurse dove underneath the desk and screaming. The supervisor who's trying to oversee them came running for the screaming, thinking it's something bad, a code, I suppose. When they get there, she then grabbed the bat nets. Everyone get your bat net, and they ran in. Nowadays, we'd think superhero. Then you think bats as in the bat net. They had to run and get the bat nets, and then the supervisor was scolding them for, getting under the table and the desk because they should be caring for their patients and saving their patients from the bats. So that's one of the funny things as a nurse that she went through for her training. When she graduated, she worked full-time, and then she had many lifelong friends, one of which is Jean Matthews O'Connor, through which they became extended family of ours. And that's how she met my dad, through her nursing friend in nursing school. And then also a friend, Peg, who I just alerted her to my mother's passing. Peg is probably the last member of their school of nursing. So I guess they had 125 entrances. I don't know how many graduated. My mother couldn't remember, but Peg is she's 94 as well. She's probably the last living member of their class at the time. So she intermittently took leave of absence while she was raising us at different times, but whenever finances needed to, she'd go back to work and just pick up and just go back to work again. And I can't even imagine being out for years and then suddenly picking up and going back, but she was willing to do it and very capable of doing that. When I finally was in school full-time, and all of us were in school full-time, she went back and worked every other weekend. And at that point, she just was able to pick up from where she left off and worked the part-time until 1973. My father got very sick and was admitted to Memorial Hospital, and I think in the intensive care unit, he had a heart attack. And because she was so calm and she was a nurse, they let her stay there. And during one of the bad situations where he was apparently coding, but because she was so calm and held his hand, and they let her stay in there. So just that whole calm nursing demeanor is something that I kind of hope for everybody, because she just kind of coped with that. After that, we were still working. I was in nursing school, so I worked at the hospital as well. So sometimes we would work together, which was not always appreciated by the management. They preferred not to keep family members together, but it was really good on my part to just watch my mother, how she worked. Because even though I'm a nurse and she's a nurse and my daughter's a nurse, we all bring to the profession some strengths that we have, and hers, that calm demeanor and just being in charge, was something that really stayed with me. I remember one time coming onto the unit that she then worked on as a secretary, a float secretary, and they were extolling her for all her calmness and how just her being calm kept everybody else calm, and she was in charge, and she'd been a nurse for so long that they would listen to her. And I was getting my report at the desk, and she was across and with getting her report and then charge report for the whole unit. And then at that point, I'm just watching her, and as she turned to walk away, and she was always so short, and she took her little med cart, and she's heading down the wing, and the wing was like noise and bedlam and stretchers and patients and nurses, and suddenly she disappeared into the bedlam. Literally, you couldn't see her because she was so short. But I just admired that fact that there she went with a strength inside of something so small and so calm, and she just went off into the crowd and just disappeared. And I liken to think of it that the new thing that we say all the time from Bill Belichick is do your job, and I feel like my mother did a great job at her job. Thank you.